AI is a huge topic, as we mentioned. Nobody knows anything right now. So if anyone is telling you they got the full answers, then I would be a little bit suspicious of hearing what they had to say, because it's so up in the air right now, and it's changing almost weekly. Really, there's new stuff coming out. Um, so the one thing we could probably say fairly certainly is that there will be an effect on the industry. In fact, there already has been. It's just the question is how much of an effect and who specifically will it affect. But before we can talk about any of that, we need to back up kind of a big step and define what we mean when we say AI, because actually that's quite a lot of things even currently. So for those of you who are in visual design, as I am, and if you go into Photoshop, there are new categories of neural filters, for example, which will help you on routine tasks like selecting things. There's like a subject select where it will just select for you like the person out of a portrait photo or something like that. There's depth map generators. There's like stuff like that, which is very routine work, which is just kind of time saving type of stuff. None of that would be possible without some sort of AI sort of learning algorithm happening under the hood there. Then there's obviously the stuff that we're more concerned about, which is taking sort of vast amounts of existing artwork, crunching that down and sort of essentially using that information to spit out new content on demand at the tip of your fingers as you're typing. There's video AI, that kind of thing. So there's a bit of a range when it comes to that. So I think sort of the overall impact, sort of at that low end, the sort of neural filters and little sort of tools that are already existing, that's going to speed up workflow for the people who are already in the industry. The problem is the net effect of that is that when you make the people that exist faster at any given task, especially the low end tasks, what that ends up doing is that you can give that one person a lot more work, which means you need less of that type of person doing that job. So that's going to hurt people just coming out of schools or who are fresh into the industry. And those entry level jobs are super important, I feel like, because that's where you learn how to become a professional in the industry. That's how you learn to sort of interact with other departments and your managers. That's how you learn how to do naming conventions and proper version controls using all of these types of software programs, and just learning the tools of your trade. So I think even if that was the only effect, that would be detrimental to the industry. Sort of moving up higher up the scale, we're already seeing sort of generative AI stuff being used as part of pitches and like very, very early viz dev type of works, where traditionally you would need to hire you know, um, some viz dev artists to try to put together a pitch package for something like that. We're already seeing it in book illustration, where book illustrators are now sort of losing out at a certain level to authors who can simply just type in what they want and have it on their book covers. So already we're seeing some sort of contraction happening here. At the same time, we're also seeing sort of a backlash that's happening to AI as well. So there's recent controversies about certain ad campaigns. I forget which ones, and maybe you are familiar with it, but basically it was obvious that it was AI done. And then the commentary online was that, oh, AI is kind of for when you don't have money to actually get it done properly by in effect, it was basically the cheap solution there. So I think already the public is starting to become savvy to at least poorly done AI with no sort of artistic sort of merit used in the creation of it. And then you also have the fact that, at least as it currently stands in US law, um, works which are primarily created by AI is non-copyrightable, as far as I understand it. That for a work to be copyrightable, it has to have been done mostly by a human. So you've got all of these things sort of brewing around right now, and we don't really know exactly how that's all going to come down. But I think in the end, from what I've seen, what's out there, just on my daily feeds that I'm seeing the latest stuff, is that AI seems to be really good at some things and really not good at other things. And the Sora stuff with the the text to video kind of stuff is super impressive in some respects. But if you kind of look at the types of things that it's able to do, it's still not creating narratives. It's still not able to do things to 100% accuracy. There's all sorts of little errors, which of course some of which will be sort of cleaned up over time, and some of which might always require a human hand. So in the end, I think that probably it's just going to be a thing that we have to live with as an industry, to some extent or another. And it probably, at least to begin with, will result in some contraction of the size of our industry. There will probably be less jobs as a result of this, but possibly in the long run, what might happen is that it's easier for creators to put out content using some of the more procedural things that AI is able to bring. And perhaps the net effect in the end is that we get more creations, more animations, more illustrations, more films or whatever it is, done by smaller crews, sort of working together rather than larger studios. And it just becomes another tool in our tool set. But regardless, before this can ever get to the point, I think, of having a positive impact, they need to figure out a way to either compensate the artists which are being used in the database, or find an alternate means of sort of teaching the algorithm of how to work. So that's basically all I've got to say on that in a nutshell. So what I tell my students at the Idea Academy right now, who are studying things like illustration or visual development or all of this kind of concept artist kind of stuff, what I tell them is that basically, to future-proof yourself as much as possible, I'm trying to get you to think of yourself as sort of concept plus, which means you increasingly can't just be someone who paints pretty pictures or characters any longer. And that was already the case. The way I have been encouraging students to teach, I lean heavily on 3D programs, just because in a great deal of the fields, film, animation, a lot of sort of sub jobs in that, it's just a lot faster if you can sort of use 3D to some extent to help block out your ideas. So just continuing that trend, the more kind of you are able to be somewhat competent at all and have that shown in your work, I think the more useful you will be, and the more you will stand out in a possible future, which might include less jobs. So, for example, it's one thing if you can paint a beautiful, like, imagine an amazing establishing shot of a huge vista, and in the distance is a castle sitting on a hill or something. So that used to be enough. If you could paint that beautifully enough, someone would hire you for just that. But these days, if you could do that, plus you're able to animate some effects blowing across the scene, and you're able to do like a slight push in on the camera, and you're able to do a lighting pass on it, and a little bit of compositing work, now all of a sudden you're not just a previs artist. You're someone who maybe can help out the VFX team on how sparkling magical effects happen. Maybe you're someone who can do color scripts and do lighting boards and kind of show that kind of stuff. Maybe you can work with the previs team to kind of work a little bit with camera moves and stuff like that. So being able to, I guess, in a word, be agile, so that you can be useful to a production maybe in several steps. That would be my number one sort of defense against becoming obsolete in the face of what AI can do. And the other thing too is to which so the second one is not necessarily for everybody, but if you are at all inclined to market yourself as a creator, that is something that no AI can do. There's no AI that I have seen that is coming up with an amazing pitch for a show or an incredible character series, world building kind of stuff. So if you fill your and this has always been the case, on the one hand, let's say you've got one person who's got amazing portfolio work, but it's just random. Here's a fantasy character, here's a sci-fi environment, here's like a pirate thing, as opposed to someone who is building out a whole world. They're doing backstory, they're doing a little bit of writing, they've got all the characters are in one consistent style, and they're kind of working everything out. That is another sort of valuable skill that I don't think they'll be able to replace for a long time. So those are just two strategies that I am trying to encourage people to embrace as they sort of buckle up for our future. There may be more, but those are the ones that are coming to mind offhand.
So I understand you correctly that you're basically foreseeing that people will have to get closer to the story and become storytellers.
It's possible as one potential path, absolutely. And keep in mind that not everyone is in this to be a storyteller. I totally understand. Some people just want to have somebody tell me what to draw, and then they will draw it. And for those people, I think it might be a little bit more difficult in the future, in the sense that whereas maybe you needed 6 of those people in the past, maybe in the future you only need 4 of them on a show, right? Because a lot of these tasks that might take you, several days could now be done in a single day. For example, I've seen AI programs take like a character design, and you type in, give me turnarounds of it, and turnarounds, which might take you like the better part of a week to really get really tight turnarounds, can be done, in an afternoon. And then with a little bit of fixing up, that might go from a 5-day task to a 2 or 3-day task or something. And if that's the case, then you need less of those people. So if you're that type of person who is kind of just in it for the craft of things, then I would say the way to go is maybe embracing some of the features of AI a bit, to where it is able to do some of these tasks for you. And that's for that group of artists. But for the rest of you, yeah, embracing the storytelling sort of aspect of our craft, that could be a way to go. If not for, the industry can only buy so many TV pilots at one time, obviously, right? Not everyone is going to get their own show or their own film or their own animated sort of comic or whatever it is put out there. But what that can do is it can be your calling card, basically. So if you're able to put something out that is this cohesive vision of storytelling, that puts you in line maybe for the maybe mid-level sort of type positions, whereas instead of just being considered an environment artist, you're maybe in a lead or something like that, or maybe you're involved in the story team. And that's just the type of stuff that I think we'll have to be thinking a little bit more about in the future.
Where did you find the motivation to actually get into telling your own stories, as opposed to not actually being asked to do it at your job?
I guess for me, storytelling has always been inseparable from the art. When you're a concept artist, concept art is in the end kind of, if you break it down, it's always about sort of problem solving and telling a story. I always tell my students that if you want to do key art illustration, which is kind of basically, you're essentially illustrating one frame from this imaginary movie. You have to think of yourself as an entire film studio, right? You are in charge of lighting. You're in charge of casting the characters who are in there. You're in charge of blocking the action. You're in charge of set design, set dress, just all of this stuff. You're a VFX artist. You're basically a one-man studio doing this one frame of this movie, which doesn't exist. And that's always kind of the way I've approached my illustrations, is that the entire point is to tell a story. So for me, it just came very naturally that a lot of times if I'm sitting around on a piece working on it for days or weeks, that just inevitably a story will fall out of it. And I can't help myself. It's just like the characters, human beings doing something, to me naturally leads themselves to some kind of a story happening there. So even if there was no story when I started something, it will have a story by the time I finish it, because this is just what's going around in my brain. So that's just me. I do understand that not everyone works like that, but it's a good way to sort of think about, if you're doing complex scenes which are meant to be telling a story, thinking about the world building and all of that stuff, I think is pretty helpful. A reason for panic in the industry in general? I mean, there's always reason for panic. I mean, currently, as we speak in March of 2024, it seems like every studio you've ever heard of, whether it's games, films, animation, anything, is laying off, firing employees, closing down. And this is when the economy is doing not too bad in a general sense, right? So that is a little bit concerning. And the causes and effects of that, I am not smart enough to figure out, but there's like a lot happening in the world. There's a lot happening in the streaming industries, the publishers, the big studios. There's like a lot of moving parts happening, and a lot of people have different opinions on why exactly this is all happening. But so you've got all of that happening on top of this AI stuff. And so, you could, on the one hand, you could say, well, this is very concerning. But having been in this industry for the last 20 years, I can't think of any time when we weren't panicking. And that's just kind of the nature of this job. This job is not like, if stability is your number one thing that you want out of life, this might not be the ideal industry for you, just because you are always basically working on a project. Or even if you're sort of on staff at a studio, it might just be one game or one film or something, and maybe the studio lays off half their staff, maybe the studio closes. So I think we're, as artists in the biz, are in a nonstop state of panic. So in that sense, I don't think it's necessarily anything different. But who knows? Ask me in 6 months, and I might be freaking out completely. Okay, is it a risky business to enter the art field right now? I guess specifically entertainment art. Yes, it is a risky business. Was it risky when I graduated in 2000? Yes, it was. Also a risky business at that time. Art has always been a risky business. This is the reason that your parents, when you say, I want to be an artist, like drop dead on the floor or freak out and start throwing dishes everywhere. Like, no one wants to hear their kid. If I had a kid and they said they would want to be an artist, I would like smash their pencils and give them a computer instead and say, do this. This is much more stable. But that's always been the case. And so you could say that in a sense, like, oh, it's been worse. It's more expensive than ever. And it's true. But also, what is true is that it's never been easier to get information, to get access to software, and to find other people to work on stuff. And you see this happening all the time. So the only explosion that is bigger than the AI explosion is if you go to YouTube, if you go to Vimeo, if you go to any TikTok or whatever, what you see is an explosion of independent creators doing whatever they feel like and putting it out there and getting a large audience. And some of them are even making money from this. So I guess if you're asking what if I was to do it over again starting out today, what I would be doing is getting, well, first of all, probably I would do some sort of minimal college education just to sort of cover my bases, not art school necessarily. But then there are millions of art workshops that you can take both online and in person, such as Anomalia, which will provide you training, which is going to be much more informationally dense and valuable to you than sort of spreading it out over 4 years or whatever. Um, and then I would start building my network of people who I wanted to create with. I talk to teenagers these days who have been using Blender since they were in grade school, doing incredible stuff that I have no idea how in the world they're doing this. And I'm in awe. It's just the talent and just the drive is incredible. And I just think about what I was doing when I was in grade school, and trust me, it was not anything like that. So I think in the end, sort of it's what you're getting is just an inflation of all the good and the bad. So yes, there's a lot of scary stuff, but yes, we have more tools than ever before. So if this is your passion, then in some ways you really have no choice. Like if art is something that is on your brain at all times, then you're going to do it one way or the other. And the only question is, like, is there a way to do this in a way that makes sense that won't ruin your life if it doesn't immediately happen? And so that's probably the way I would go about it, is just sort of yeah, just sort of using the tools that we have these days and seeing what I can sort of put out there and making my sort of network grow as early as possible, building my community and going from there.
So learning how to draw is still a good skill to have because it's a communication language after all.
Absolutely. Yeah, there will never, so getting lost in the middle of all of this craziness here is that the fundamentals will always be relevant. If even if you locked two people in two different rooms and gave them both AI, and one of them's got art training and the other doesn't, the person with art training is probably going to be able to produce better results with the same tool set because they've been thinking about things like composition and lighting and color and sort of narrative and all of this kind of stuff. And the other person's been thinking about, oh, what's cool or what kind of looks like that latest movie I just saw. So there will always be a place for that, which is why I think there will always be a place for art education, whether it is like a traditional art school or more sort of the workshop method. Yeah, I think that is something. It's going to take quite a while to replace that with robots.
It sounds like art education will become similar to shaping a personality the way learning a foreign language does.
Oh, I can see that. Sure. Yes, absolutely. As they say, knowing a foreign language really affects the way you sort of see the world and think about things. And I guess you could say that in a sense about sort of learning the language of art, which you could make an argument for is its own sort of language as well to be studied.